Okay, we are talking again about the Sinaitic Covenant. And we've been talking about what God said, that if you shema, listen to my voice, and if you shamar my covenant, then you're going to be my own possession. You shall be a God, to God, a kingdom of priests. You're going to be a holy, what does it mean, holy? Separate, just a separate nation, okay? And then in Exodus chapter 20, we have what people call the Ten Commandments, and literal would be God's 10 words. And God comes up and he says, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol. You shall not take the name Yahweh in vain. You have a rest day given free of charge just by me to you, so you can go to church. Oh, boy, what happened there? You are supposed to honor your parents, and you're not supposed to murder, you're not supposed to commit adultery, you're not supposed to steal, and you're not to bear false witness against one another, and your meditations are not supposed to be about stuff you want. That's called coveting. Okay? So all the other laws from that time on that we see in Scripture, they're all kind of based up underneath those, one way or another. Now, from Exodus chapter 20 and 21, all the way to the end of Deuteronomy, we find a lot of different laws that are God's laws. Now, we're going to jump up into Romans chapter 11, please. Turn to Romans 11. We will start with verse 14. Miss Davis, if you would start reading right there.
If somehow I might move to jealousy my fellow countrymen and save some of them, for if their rejection be reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? And if the first piece of dough be holy, the lump is also. And if the root be holy, the branches are too. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you being a wild olive were grafted in among them.
Okay, stop right there. He says we're grafted in. Grafted in. Stop. The picture that we've been given is the following. God has these old covenants that don't apply to us at all anymore. The creation covenant doesn't apply to us anymore. The Adamic covenant doesn't apply to us anymore. The Noachic covenant does not apply to us anymore. The Abrahamic covenant doesn't apply to us anymore. And the Sinaitic covenant doesn't apply to us anymore. They've all been done away. Okay, they've been done away. But look at what Mrs. Davis just read. She read, and I'm sure it's probably something she penciled into her Bible, but it seemed to me that she snuck up and penciled it into mine too, because it said, you were grafted in. Now there's a problem. Now if this is the only place that we saw this, maybe, but it's not. This is just the one we're using. You were grafted in. If the thing was dug up and thrown away, folks, you got grafted into a dead tree. There's nothing that you got grafted into except one thing. You were grafted into a covenant. Okay? You were grafted into a covenant. Now, I understand, I do, that you were grafted into the new covenant which God, we're going to show this, God made with the children of Israel. But they never would have thought that the old covenant was done away with. Oh boy, everybody's screaming, yelling. All right, please settle down. The Bible never says that covenant has been done away with. It does not say it. The closest it comes is in Hebrews, where it says that it is becoming, there's the text, the tense rather, it is becoming obsolete. Now something that is obsolete, all that means is not as good as other ways. Other ways make it to where it's taken over. We don't go out and, when it's time for Mrs. Davis to cook, split wood. Okay? We turn on a stove in there. Now, could we cook using a fire and a metal stove? And we could. It's just that it's obsolete. You can cook that way. If I decided to go to Austin this afternoon and I jump in the car, I can be there in about an hour and 15 minutes. However, I could go over, and since I'm not under the law anymore, steal one of my neighbor's horses and bridle that thing up and go on into Austin, and it may be a couple of days before I get there, but I still got there. But the horse is obsolete. From what I can tell, so is stealing and theft. It doesn't matter anymore. You can do that in our country. The old covenant, Jesus never said it's done away with. He simply, and the writers of the New Testament go, we've got a, what do the writer of Hebrews call it? Better covenant. Better means I'm comparing something. Now, again, I tell you, we Gentiles, we were grafted in. It doesn't say that God came along, rooted up the whole tree, and grafted you into a dead tree. He grafted you into the covenants that he had made with mankind and eventually with the children of Israel, and we got grafted in. But know for a fact, we were grafted into a covenant. Grafted into a covenant. Go on, Miss Davis, and keep on reading there. You had stopped. Read verse 17 again.
But if some of the branches were broken off, and you being a wild olive were grafted in among them, and became partaker with them of the rich root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant toward the branches. But if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root supports you. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. Quite right. They were broken off for their unbelief. But you stand by your faith. Do not be conceited, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. Behold then the kindness and severity of God. To those who fell, severity, but to you God's kindness, if you continue in his kindness. Otherwise you also will be cut off. And they also, if they do not continue in their unbelief, will be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut off from what is by nature a wild olive tree, and were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, how much more shall these who were the natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree?
Thank you, Miss Davis. Now, notice he didn't ever say grafted into a dead tree. It's grafted into this olive tree. And folks, and of course this is, and again, one of those scriptures that warns believers, guess what? You can be cut off too. Now, I find it interesting too. Look in verse 22. Behold then the kindness and severity of God. To those who fell, severity. But you, God's kindness, if you continue in his kindness. Well, how in the world do you do that? What does that mean? What does it mean, continue in his kindness? It might mean, I would think, that you continue in his life. The only kind person that you know, I assure you, sorry, I know you're thinking it's you, but the only kind person that you really know is God. Kindness comes from him being in your life. And folks, we've shown these covenants and how important they are to us. And we're going to go back and talk about that again too. But we've just kind of said, okay, this covenant here, so far we've got 5, but we've got to this one where these laws are, those terrible old laws, and those are stinky. And they're just awful. We're told they are, but I want to talk about these for a few minutes here. Turn to Psalm 19. Everybody read it together. Psalm 19, I want you to read out loud verse 7. Wow, go.
The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts.
Oh, that's fine. Oh, that's good though, Miss Davis. You sound good. But I didn't want you to go any further. But you can go further.
I love these.
I know, you love Psalm 19. We'll come back and just read it again, just for fun sometime, okay? Psalm 19:7, and it's not the only place that it says this, but it says, the law of the Lord is perfect. Okay. Let's say that this hand right here is perfect. Now, I know you're all thinking, it plays the banjo. There's a hidden evil in those fingers. But that's not what we're talking about right now. If this hand is perfect, if I add one cell to it, what does it become? Imperfect. Let's try that again. This hand is perfect, but if I add one cell to it, by definition, what have I done? You can't make it more perfect than perfect. If I add one cell, what did I do? Everybody speak up. I made it what? Imperfect. If I take a cell away, what have I done? Made it imperfect. The law of the Lord is perfect. The law of the Lord is perfect. I don't think that I'm alone in this because I think God is very much on my side since His Word says it. These people that say the law doesn't apply to the Christian anymore. And of course the Jews, Paul says, I'm trying to make them jealous. The Jews are going, boy, I don't want any of that. The law of the Lord is perfect. And if it is perfect, you can't get rid of it, by definition. And you could say, well, God deals with us differently. His law is still, wait a second, the law is still perfect. He is still dealing with us by faith. He's dealing with us by grace, but His law remains. It's perfect. You can't change it, one way or another. And this is really of vital importance. James 2:10 says, in fact, let's read that one again too. This is too important to read. We need to get this in here. James chapter 2, verse 10. Says, whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles in one point, he's become guilty of all. Is James crazy? Is this man insane? I mean, what law? We're no longer under law, right? When we see the phrases, and it says it twice, it says it once in Romans, and it says it in Galatians, you are no longer under the law. Paul is talking about one thing, and one thing only. As I told you a while ago, Moses didn't walk up with the Ten Commandments to the children of Israel in slavery and say, once you get these down, let us know, I'll come back. That's not what was said. He redeemed first, brought them out, and then said, here's the covenant. Okay? And it wasn't that they obeyed the law and their works got them out of Egypt. God was merciful to them and got them out of the house of slavery and out of the land of Egypt. He did the same for us. He was merciful to us, and He offered us salvation to be saved from that, from every lawless deed, by the life and the blood, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. He brought us out, and then He said, here's the law. Now, James has just told us you can't violate any of them, you can't get rid of them. If you do one, you've messed them all up. I want us to turn to Romans, and let's turn to Romans chapter 8. And I want you to see exactly what Paul tells us. He's going to say exactly the same thing. Romans chapter 8, This is a scripture that for those that love to get into this stuff, you should have marked. I mean, this is one of them. Verse 4, Miss Davis.
In order that the requirement of the law might be
Start with verse 3.
For what the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, God did.
Stop. What could not the law do? It was weak via the flesh. What's the flesh? My attempts to do righteousness before God. My attempts to show that I'm a righteous person. My attempts to be a righteous person. But that's my flesh can't do that. Read it again. What the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh. Read it.
What the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, God did, sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and as an offering for sin, he condemned sin in the flesh, in order that the requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit.
Okay. He's talking about two things. First, he's talking about justification. God justified you. He didn't say it, but he says it all sorts of other places in that book. He says, basically, God justified you. How did he do it? He sent his Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and we know that he died for us, and that he might redeem us from every lawless deed. We've already looked at that. And he has brought us out of these things. We're no longer enslaved to sin. But we get out and we realize, oh, we're in another covenant. That's right. You came out of one covenant in which you were enslaved to sin and enslaved to Satan, and you've now been brought out, and you are now enslaved to righteousness. You're enslaved to God. And the reason that he brought you out is so that, and it said it right there in verse 4, so that the requirement of the law would be fulfilled within you. What is justification? God looks and he looks at you and, oh, the requirement of the law has been filled on the outside of you. Has it? No. But has it according to God's eyesight? Yes. Why? I'm in Jesus Christ, who did exactly that. He fulfilled it. And so I am in him and I'm justified and I can be in the presence of God. And he says, I like that, but we've got another step. And that next step is that, well, my life is going to be in you and my grace is going to be in you in order that the requirement of the law will no longer, not just be on the outside of you, but is now going to be, what did it say? Within you, inside you. Now, what was the law? Weak. The law is weak in that it can't save you. The law is not given to earn righteousness. This is where the term legalism comes from. People go, oh, well, you're just trying to be legalistic. Now, if they defined it just as I'm trying to work my way into heaven, I would go, okay, I agree. That's completely wrong. The Bible screams against that. But they don't use it for just that. They use it whenever you go, oh, there's a scripture verse. I wonder if we should obey that. Oh, no, that would be legalistic. It doesn't matter what it is, somebody's going to tell you it's legalistic. God's law is the standard of measure of righteousness. That's what it is. It's the standard of measure. It's the ruler. I've used this picture so many times. You don't go, I'm going to go out and build a house, and all you do is show up with a bunch of lumber and a bunch of nails, screws, whatever it may be, and you're a ruler. Well, I mean, I'm here to build the house, not with just a ruler. All it is the measuring stick. You have to have other stuff to build that house. And the ruler was never designed to make you righteous. I'm going to say it again. The ruler, the law, was never designed to make you righteous. Now, I thought of a terrible pun, but there is a ruler that is designed to make you righteous. The king. The king. The king's life in you is designed to make you righteous. The grace of God has appeared, and it is a person, Jesus Christ. He is within you. And he empowers you, but empowers you to do what? Well, be a Christian. What does that mean? Oh, walk the aisle? Shake the hand? Get dunked, go to church. What else? Walk the aisle? Is this a trick question? Sadly, it is. No, something had to change. And Paul tells us, and boy, we're told in a lot of places, that the requirement of the law would be fulfilled within you. Now, I'm going to tell you something. You can't have the requirement of the law being fulfilled within you and not being fulfilled within you at the same time. Oh, don't do that. That'd be legalistic. These things, folks, are false. This stuff like this is from Satan. God's law is a standard of the way things work. And again, our country, our nation, has following behind the church that tells us the law doesn't apply to us. We have now become a people of lawlessness. We are. It's amazing. We do anything you want, as long as it's within the politically correct thing of these people. And of course, their PC stuff is all against God's law. God's law defines how things work. Like B, his law is still there. The law of gravity is still there, holding everything together. His sun holding everything together. We could go on and name all sorts of laws in life that's the way things work. And in the way people work, the way mankind was designed, there's a law that makes things work. And as I've said before, I dare you, start dishonoring your parents. Go ahead. Commit murder and see how things work out for you. Commit adultery. It's fine. You're a Christian. You're free from that. And see how life works out for you. This thing of, oh, well, it doesn't hurt anyone. This is why God said it. Because when we do these things to other people, it hurts them. It hurts them. Trust me, it hurts you too, but it hurts them. That is not the way God's law works. Now, some people would come up and say, well, the New Testament said that Jesus said, I'm giving you a new commandment. And the new commandment is love. Just love. And you're just trying not to lose it. But love has been defined in God's law from the very beginning. God is love. He can't define not love when He's given you a law. And to kind of wrap this thing up, turn to John, wrap this part of things up here. Turn to John chapter 15. No, 14. We'll start with 14. Ms. Davis, I want you just to read first just John 14:21.
He who has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me, and he who loves me shall be loved by my Father, and I will love him and will disclose myself to him.
Read, I think it's 24.
23. If anyone loves me,
Yes.
he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our abode with him. He who does not love me does not keep my words, and the word which you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me. Keep.
Keep the word, keep the word, keep the word. Keep the commandments. Now, you got that? If we're going to love God, this is not the only place it says it. It says in a lot of places. We don't even go to 1 John. But if you're going to love God, you have to keep His commandments. Okay? And so, it's love. Now, in the same discourse, Jesus goes on. And turn to chapter 15, John 15. Ms. Davis, read 7 through 9, I think.
If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples.
Okay, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, and then all those other things follow. Now go ahead and read those next two verses.
Just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you.
Here's the new commandment. Now he's going to say that. Go ahead.
Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I've kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be made complete.
How does Jesus define that you are going to abide in his love? In other words, if we were to keep the new commandment, which is an old commandment, but if we're going to keep the new commandment, if we're going to obey that new commandment, he says the way that you're going to do that is by what? He said, I want you, if you're going to abide in my love, you have to do one thing. Keep my commandments. And then he says, in the same way that I did something, I kept my Father's commandments, and I abide in his love. So for those that would come up and say, but we've got the new commandment, which is love one another. Well, yeah, I agree, but he added something to it, as I have loved you. Crucifixion time. The way that we love one another, the only way is for Jesus, who is all righteousness, has fulfilled the law and has not decided, okay, I'm going to do away with it, that he now lives in you and he's doing the obeying. And if you're going, I'm not going to look at the law, including the Old Testament law, well, maybe I should say especially the Old Testament law, that because it's been done away with, we're under a new dispensation, we're under a new excuse. That's what all that is. We're under a different dispensation. Oh, we're under a dispensation of excuses. Excuses to do what? You know what? For the most part, and we laugh at that, but the fact is that when we come up with the excuses, we've already done away with the law. There's nothing to excuse. The fact is that the Christian church said no law applies to us anymore, and we don't need an excuse. I've got my holy excuse, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. No rules, just Jesus. That's impossible. It is impossible to have Jesus as ruler and have no rules. It is impossible to have the kingdom of God and have no king.